Hello, everyone. I'm the Bodacious Cowboy with my co-host, Christy Knichel. Are you ready for a special edition of the Storytelling Chronicles? We are. Let's go.
Look out! Pop, pop, it's showtime. Showtime. Guess who's back again? Oh, they don't know. Oh, they don't know. I bet they know as soon as we walk in. Shut up. I'm wearing Cuban links. Yeah. Designer mix. Yeah. Inglewood's finest shoes. Whoop, whoop. Don't look too hard, might hurt yourself. Known to keep the color red, the blues.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Storytelling Chronicles, empowering women into logistics. I am the Bodacious Cowboy. Next to me is my co-host, Christy Knichel. Hey, Christy, how you doing?
Doing good.
Good, man. Did you have a good Easter?
Yeah, just like a normal day for us. Just cook and hang out and just get stuff done. It was actually a pretty nice day out. How about you?
Yeah, I did the same thing. Very relaxing for a change. I actually did nothing yesterday. I think I was on LinkedIn and my email probably for about 45 minutes, and that was it. But I just had to put it down. You know, those are the type of days that you really have to think about your family and yourself sometimes. So,
yeah.
But today we have an awesome guest, Wendy Buckley. We're going to bring her in 1 minute, but tell everybody about Wendy.
Absolutely. So Wendy is a seasoned expert in hazardous materials with 27 years of industry experience. She is the founder and president of Stars Hazmat Consulting, a company she has successfully led for 13 years, helping shippers, carriers, warehouses, and other stakeholders manage risk, ensure compliance, and enhance safety. A veteran firefighter with a decade of hazmat emergency response experience, Wendy is also a former DOT hazmat inspector for the federal government and the state of New Jersey. Her work includes enforcing transportation regulations and managing regulatory affairs for a global laboratory supply company. Wendy has trained thousands of professionals on hazmat transportation and safety regulations worldwide. She is the author of Hazardous Materials Transportation, a guide to success for EHS students and professionals, and a former professor at the University of Finlay. A recognized subject matter expert, Wendy frequently contributes to major publications, speaks at industry events across North America, and is a recurring guest on Sirius XM Radio. Let's bring her on out.
Yeah. Hey, Wendy, how are you?
Hi there. Gosh, when I hear you talk about all that, it's almost like, oh my gosh.
I was just going to say, anytime someone reads a bio like that, it's always curious at what people think, because sometimes it's like, oh, really? I did all that?
Yeah. I would say that it definitely, from what Christy just said, that wasn't an easy road, was it?
No, I had it easier than most. I've heard some pretty horrible stories about the way women have been treated in this industry, particularly, especially recently, which is weird. But I did not have most of those same experiences. So I had it much easier than I think a lot of people did.
Well, that's good to hear, I would say, because depending on who you are, you don't know what that experience is. So why don't we start off, though, with you talking about how you even got into this crazy industry and your journey to where you are today?
So I actually had a strange experience where I had the opportunity to go with a friend of mine on an ambulance call. We were actually out somewhere and the ambulance called for lifting assistance on a patient. So he was a member of the squad and he went and I was with him. So he took me with him. And of course, that was so cool. That led to me becoming an EMT and a firefighter, which then eventually led to me becoming hazmat trained. So my first hazmat call was so incredibly exciting, a dangerous one, wet material, and it was raining and there was so much fire. I was 19 years old. I was like kid in a candy store. I'm sure the driver wasn't real happy that he dumped his truck, but I thought it was pretty cool. So I was pretty much hooked from that day. And then I had the opportunity later in my college years to start going to officer candidate school for the Marine Corps, and then talked to my father, who was a Vietnam vet, and said, oh, maybe that's not the path for me. So I stuck with the firefighting for a while. Eventually it led me the opportunity to become the FRA hazmat inspector that you mentioned, enforcing those rules. And then that just started everything, training and whatnot. And I just love it. I've been doing it ever since I was 18 or 19 years old, something like that. And so I wouldn't want to do anything else. I love my job.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you specifically do now in your company. What is it that you specifically help all these different vendors trying to figure out?
So it's kind of a range, but it's all revolving around hazardous materials. So sometimes it's helping. Actually, right now today, I'm helping a company start a brand new hazmat program. They've never done hazmat before, so we're building it from scratch. Sometimes it's helping them solve a problem that they already have. One of my clients is a very big petroleum producer, so they already have a well-established business with experience, but they want to make sure they're doing everything right. So we're going through their systems and processes and optimizing things where it needs to be, and making sure everything is not only compliant for the regulations, but that's a bare minimum standard. So trying to make sure that they have some room for mistakes to be built in there, because mistakes happen. Making sure that it's optimized for them, that they remain profitable, and that they're not putting themselves at any unnecessary risk. So it could be anything. Sometimes they're researching fire codes. Sometimes it's just trying to interpret a regulation for someone. And, sometimes it's whole brand new projects that have never been done before and there is no precedent for it. So trying to establish with the regulators whether they're going to allow it or not. So I get to do all kinds of cool stuff.
That's awesome. So like when you're saying you're starting it from scratch, so are you doing it like ISO, where you're trying to mirror the image of getting all the SDS sheets in place at all of their facilities? Is it one facility, multiple facilities, different material?
Oh yeah, it's been both. I've started hazmat operations for companies that have 10 or 12 locations that just have never done hazmat before, and then this one company just has one location, but they're expanding. So they had an opportunity that was too good to pass up, and I'm going to help them make sure they do it right. And as far as the ISO thing, honestly, I'm not a big lover of ISO stuff, and I like the methodology. I like the fact that that it keeps you organized, but I think it's way too heavily focused on the paperwork, and paperwork's not what gets people killed. So for me, yes, I make sure the operations are good. I make sure SDSs are good and all of that stuff. That's all important. But mostly, I want to make sure the operation is good. I want to make sure the guys are well trained. They know what they're supposed to be doing, but they're doing it safely. They have all the tools that they need to do it safely, and that they understand the risks that they're working with. And the operational part of it, to me, is so much more important than the paperwork. Definitely. Paperwork's important, but lives are more important.
So with your consulting agency, do you work alongside with OSHA, or are you by yourself?
No, I am a DOT is my focus, not OSHA. Okay. I do work with the regulators. I have good relationships with all the regulators in DOT as well as in Canada for the same thing. I talk with some of them fairly regularly about issues that my clients have or questions or whatever. But no, I'm an independent. I'm not employed by the government, although I am looks like going to be starting to train some of the regulators as well, which is kind of neat.
Yeah. So how many women are involved in hazmat like yourself compared to your male counterparts?
Oh gosh, I don't know a statistic. I've never researched it, but if I had to guess, I'd say maybe 10%. Now, there's a lot of people in the industry that are women, a lot more now than there were when I joined. But I would say there's very few who actually do the type of work that I do. I don't think I actually know of any specifically off the top of my head, but I'm sure if I sat down and thought about it, there probably is some.
So do you get any pushback, or do you face any obstacles or barriers that you had to go through, especially when you started the business?
Yeah, so actually, to some extent, there was two things. When I first joined the Federal Railroad Administration, I was told that the guys weren't going to want to work with me because I was 20-something years old, so I was just a little kid in their eyes. These are all 50, 60-year-old men who've been on the railroad for their whole career. And I was told they weren't going to want to work with me, that they weren't going to have any respect for me, that it was going to be a problem. And I would say I got a little bit of resistance right at the beginning, but I proved myself because I asked good questions. I was paying attention. I genuinely wanted to learn. And before long, they were all on my side, and they were requesting to work with me. And as a matter of fact, they terminated the training program that I was in. I was, because I knew hazmat, but I didn't know rail. So they had me in a training program, and they terminated that program before I was done with it. So I was going to lose my job. And all of the other inspectors in my office from all the different disciplines signed a petition to save my job.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and even now, when I started the company, one of the big problems I had is I had a long-term colleague, actually somebody I worked with at FRA, an older gentleman that was helping me, working with me to get it started. I mean, it was my company, but he was right there by my side doing it all with me. And one of the things that frustrated the daylights out of me in the beginning is that everyone would default to him. They thought he was the boss and I was the trainee. And I get that. He was 20 something years older than me and whatnot, but I found that really frustrating. I've only ever had like one sort of sexual harassment thing happen my whole career. So
Really?
I'm pretty lucky in that way. And it happened one day, and I was working with the guy the whole week, and I basically told him the next morning before we went back out with the railroad guys, I said, "Put your hands on me again, or you say something like that again, I'm turning you in." He didn't. He kept himself in check, so I never said a word.
Well, I'm glad that you stood up for yourself, and glad that that's been the only incident that you've had to deal with.
Really? Yeah.
You know, or again, like the fact of you being like, you know, one of the only women in the space. And you mentioned, you know, about the whole team supporting you, you know, you potentially losing your job in that role, which I think is awesome. Because
it was a heck of a shock to me too. I would have never expected it, but it really meant the world to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also just goes to show too that they support you, right? And you're doing a good job, and they know that you're doing a good job, which is why they stood up to support you too, which is great.
Yeah, and you know, and now, you know, fast forward a few years into my company, one of my clients hired me because they got into a significant amount of trouble with FRA in particular. And once they hired us, they went back to FRA and said, "Okay, you know, we hired Stars Consulting. We're going to work with them." They're like, "Oh, you hired Stars? All right, well, we're going to give you some time because we know they'll straighten you out. We'll be back when they're done." And that's what happened. They left them alone the whole time we were working with them and getting squared away. And when we were done, they came back, and I kept up with them for about 3 years, and they never got another violation, not one.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Wanted to go back to one comment that you said earlier. So you weren't that vast in intermodal rail. Are you that way now? Like, do you move the tankers and all that kind of stuff now, or consulting that area?
Yeah, I still work a lot with rail. I do all modes of transportation, but there's not a lot of people who know rail, so we do get a lot of rail work, disproportionately so. We do a lot of truck stuff as well. Yeah. And so tank cars are my first love. So I'm more than happy to work in rail. I love trucking too, though. I enjoy it, especially the intermodal stuff. I find it incredibly fascinating. One of my responsibilities was inspecting the port of Elizabeth in New Jersey, which is an intermodal port. And I loved going in there. There was always something cool to find in there. So yeah, I still do work with rail quite a bit.
So when you do work with them, I'm just curious, what is it that you're actually doing? So for example, you know, there was that big chemical spill that happened in East Palestine, which is not far from where my office is. Mm-hmm. So what is your job or role maybe in something like that?
Well, my role would be to prevent it from happening in the first place, or at least put them in a position that if the train does have a problem with a mechanical issue and the car rolls over, that it's not breaching. So my work would come before that, as well as after the fact, if there's lawsuits involved or training that needs to happen or a new procedure because something wasn't done right. So this is not what happened, but let's assume for a second that when that train got into an accident, the bolts weren't closed and all the stuff leaked down the manway. That's not what happened. But then we would go and do a root cause analysis. We would find out exactly how it happened, what happened, and trace it back to finding out if this is a systemic problem or did it just happen to be like the really worst time for this one thing to happen. And then depending on what we discover, then we come up with a plan to prevent it from happening again. You know, if they need new equipment, like one of my clients kept having loose closures on their rail cars. And I went and did a root cause analysis because they're like, we're doing the same thing we've always done. We don't understand. I get up on the loading rack and within 30 seconds, I knew exactly what the problem was. The pipe wrench that they were using to close all the bolts on the manway was broken in half. Half of the handle was missing. So they were losing all of that leverage that they thought they were getting. So we replaced the tool and no more problems. So it just depends on what's involved. Yeah, I mean, it could be we need to redo a procedure, we need to redo training, we need to come up with a new way of inspecting things. That's probably the shortcoming I see a lot, whether it's trucks or rail cars, is a failure to inspect. They're not making sure the package is sound before they put stuff in it, and that's a recipe for disaster.
So do you actually go into these tankers? I mean, I know some people that used to go in there and look at the seals on them to make sure that they're still flexible, because once they dry out, you know what happens, you know, and plus the lining in these tankers that have to be at a certain spec because the type of, I would say acidic mostly that are in there, if there's a little crack or something in there, it could easily like tear through that, and then you've got some really big problems, especially if you got some type of chemicals that don't mix with metal, or other plastics that they have in there. Let's talk about that for a second. And the reason why, because you're a woman and you're doing this kind of stuff, and any other woman that's out there that are thinking about getting into hazmat, it's not an easy job, and there's a lot of things that's like a mechanic. You have to crawl underneath the car. You have to inspect like you did, going up the rails, checking and seeing a wrench was broken. I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
So I don't go inside the rail cars for two reasons. One, I have no need to go inside a rail car. Usually the ones I'm dealing with are dirty, and I wouldn't be able to get in them anyway. They have to be cleaned and purged for you to go in. Right. But more importantly, I am not a lover of confined space. That was my least favorite thing to do, firefighting. And if I never do it again, I'm good with that. But my job doesn't require that. But yes, I do inspect the seals. I'll go up on top of the rail cars. I mean, every time I go out in the field, I'm greasy and dirty. I'm climbing under the rail cars, getting God only knows what in my hair and everything else. So it is not for the girls that want to go to the nail salon every week. Definitely, this is not that kind of job. Grease under your fingernails is a lot more likely. But I'll go up on the cars. I'll turn in bolts and wrenches. I'm looking at the manway gaskets and all the valves and fittings. And I climbed up one time on an HMD car, which is hexamethylene diamine. It's a material used for lots of things, but including the manufacturing of nylon. And so I went up there, and there's this powder, this like crystalline powder all over the place, and it's not supposed to be there. What happened is it leaked, and it got all over the car. And when this stuff dries, it's liquid inside the container. When it's not exposed to oxygen, then it'll crystallize. It makes one heck of a mess. And so I'm up there trying to figure out why this thing is leaking, and I pull the entire valve stem out with my hand. There was no bolts holding it. So I'm right in there with the material. I'm wearing the PPE. I'm climbing under the rail car to check the threads, to look at the gasket and the bottom outlet valve, making sure that the car is mechanically sound, that the tank is sound structurally. So yes, I'm climbing on things, getting dirty out in the field. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that, because most people probably don't even realize that this is like a need, right, for companies or carriers that are shipping hazmat type of freight.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And unfortunately, I would also say sometimes it's even the people that are loading those cars. It surprises me sometimes how even big companies, I mean, everyone thinks it's just going to be the mom and pops, but that's not always true. So you go in and they're, these are things that they should know just because they're working with rail cars, 30,000 gallons potentially of material. And they don't even understand how the rail car works. They don't know what the pipes and valves and fittings actually do. They don't know what they look like on the inside. So I have all sorts of photographs that I have in a presentation that I do to teach them how the car is put together, how it's welded, how the valves work, what they look like inside, how the heater coils work. I mean, I go through everything in great detail.
So question on that. So who then is truly responsible to make sure that's in the best condition when it comes to a shipper? Because those are probably brought in. It's not necessarily always brought in by a trucker, right?
Potentially. They're leased.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the tank trucks are obviously brought in by truckers. The tank cars are obviously brought in by the railroads. So, So when it comes to rail or truck, mechanical stuff is the responsibility of the carrier. So that would be brakes, wheels, handholds, steps, ladders, any of those things, no matter what the vehicle, those are all mechanical things that are the carrier's responsibility, even on a rail car. And when it comes to the tank integrity, valves, fittings, closures, the service equipment is basically a general term for all of that stuff. When it comes to that stuff, that's the shipper. Now, that may be the company that's loading it, or it may be the company that unloaded it, depending on who is being offered into transportation. Even residue packages have to still meet the same requirements. They still have to be closed properly, have leak-proof gaskets, all of that stuff, properly torqued bolts, whether it's a truck or a rail car. And those are the responsibilities of who was ever putting it in transportation. And one of the things a lot of companies do is they don't want to look at the gasket. They don't want to open the manway on the truck or on the rail car, and they don't want to look at that because it's exposing your people to the product. Well, unfortunately, the law says it is their responsibility. And if they're not opening the manway to look at those gaskets, they're putting themselves at a lot of risk. And they'll tell you, oh, well, we never opened it. It can't possibly be bad. Not true. Those things only have a certain amount of lifespan. And the more they come into contact with the product, the less likely it's going to be to last longer.
Something, it brought up a very valid point here. That's all part of the negotiations up front. When you're leasing, say 100 tankers or whatever, that the seals are going to be in working order, that it's been repainted, stenciled, a new sleeve put inside. I mean, there's so many different things because you want to take the burden of liability off of yours and put it on the leaser, actually. And that's a valid point, that a lot of shippers miss that. And that's part of your consultancy, I'm sure, that when you go in there and you're talking about ramping up and starting a whole new project, those are probably the type of things that you're going to talk about to put more money back to the bottom line.
Yeah, one of the things I think I find the most when it comes to the actual tank trucks and tank cars that people overlook is first making sure that that package is authorized for that material. Just because it's a tanker, it doesn't mean anything can go in it. Certain types of tanks can only hold certain things. And so, I had a client recently put sodium hydroxide in an aluminum tank truck. That is an absolute no-no. They don't play nice together, and there's an instantaneous violent reaction, and it can really hurt people. You can cause a mechanical explosion. So, not every package type is suitable for every material. So one of the things also that is the second thing I see a lot is people overlook the lining. They say, oh, well, this is a lined tank car. All right, no problem, let's put it in. Well, here's the thing they don't get is not all liners are compatible with all products. So you have to research it, and you usually will have to send the information to the technical people at the lining manufacturer to make sure that that product is good with that material. And they're going to ask you a zillion questions you would have never thought of. What's the loading temperature? What's the pH? What are the components in it? Things that who would think about asking the loading temperature? Well, the linings, let's say you load this product hot, that lining may not be suitable for a hot product. So, and if, like you talked about, Jeff, there was actually just a situation recently where the lining failed, that had gotten scratched or something. And so it was just a little tiny chip out of this epoxy paint, and it started eating at that metal on the inside of the rail car. That lining is supposed to protect that metal from being touched by the material, and it corroded right through it. So now you have this spout of material like flying out of this rail car under high pressure because, that's a lot of material in there pushing down on it. And you basically have a stream pouring out of this rail car in a little hole. And it's all because the lining wasn't maintained properly.
See, I would have never known any of that because that's not the type of business that I've ever been involved with. But learning about that's interesting. And when you talked about your recent client that filled product in a shipment there where it could become, just a violent reaction, what did happen?
So, talking very generally, I can't get into a lot of detail, but talking very generally, what happens when you put sodium hydroxide in an aluminum tank is it starts to have a chemical reaction with the aluminum. And that reaction is what we call exothermic. It puts out a lot of heat, and it also produces an incredible amount of hydrogen gas. And so the pressure relief device can activate under high pressure. So you'll start to see vapor coming out. And unfortunately, if you don't recognize that that's an emergency, that something is going horribly wrong, and shut down the loading, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Because think about it, you have an empty truck, and now you're going to start filling product in it. You're closing that vapor space. The more liquid you put in, and then the more liquid you put in, the more of a reaction you're having. So you're closing that vapor space even faster. And at some point, that pressure relief device can no longer contain that pressure, can no longer contain those vapors. And so what happened is, before much longer, now you've got liquid pouring out of the pressure relief device, which is never supposed to happen. So they continued loading while this incident was occurring, and eventually the pressure relief device couldn't keep up. It reached the burst pressure of the tank and exploded. There was no fire, just a mechanical explosion.
And that's why I carry all of these with me.
Hazmat books. Yeah. So, I mean, when there is an issue, right, I'm sure just like any other claim, then it kind of goes back to, again, like say if the rail or the trucker were supposed to check the equipment, but does the shipper also have a responsibility to double check that equipment too, to ensure all those same things when it shows up? Or
so that is a great question. I'm so glad you asked me that. So let's talk about rail cars first, because this is a huge problem with rail. Somehow along the way, the railroads or someone, I believe it was the railroads, but that's just an assumption, has taught the shippers that they have to inspect wheels, brakes, handholds, sill steps, ladders. They don't. Your shippers, your loaders are not trained for that. So for example, you walk up to a tank car and you look at the brake piston, and you're saying you have good brakes. Well, do you know? Did you perform a brake test? No. You're looking at it visually. Okay, if you're going to look at it visually, what is that supposed to look like? Well, that piston is supposed to have 7 to 9 inches of piston travel. So, okay, that one's good. Next one. Well, now you can't find the brake piston because it's a totally different type of brake. So it's just asking your loaders to inspect mechanical things is in your worst interest. They are not trained for that. The car inspectors that inspect these things for the railroad get like a year of training. So your loaders are responsible for anything that's on the tank that will keep the stuff inside the package or at the service equipment. So what I mean by that is the tank itself, the markings, the jacket, the liquid line, air line, sample line, all of those valves and fittings on there, the bottom outlet valves, skid plates, anything that protects the material itself is shipper responsibility. Anything that is mechanical, like we talked about ladders and brakes and wheels and all that, is railroad responsibility. And you asking your guys, are these a good wheel? Well, he doesn't know that because he doesn't have a wheel gauge. He doesn't know how to read a wheel gauge. He doesn't know what it's actually supposed to look like. All he's saying, yeah, that looks like a wheel. Now, obviously, if half of the wheel's missing, pretty much anybody can tell that. But bar that, you can't tell with certainty by looking at a wheel that it's a good wheel. And if you're the shipper and you're signing off that you inspected brakes and ladders and wheels and something goes wrong, you know your name is getting pulled into that in the lawsuit. So stop signing off on that stuff. Your guys are not trained for it. They shouldn't be trained for it. They're trained to keep the dangerous stuff inside the package. That's what they need to do and focus on. And they can
another thing too,
I
was going to say another thing.
The truckers are supposed to be inspecting mechanical stuff.
Yeah, to your point, it's actually the responsibility of the shipper to vet who they're doing business with to make sure that they're properly certified to handle the type of equipment, because not all certifications are good for all materials shipped. And so you have to have due diligence by asking those pertinent questions. It's not as easy as calling up a carrier or an IMDL service provider and saying, hey, I'm shipping this, how much are you going to get? No, you better be asking a hell of a lot more questions on that and being very specific as to the material being shipped, the type of tanker that you need in order to put it, because U.S. shippers should know the type of tank that has to go into. You should be certified yourself, because that's going to come back to you really hard, and I'll use this as an example. When I was with Ford Motor Company, we had seat pretensioners, hazmat, explosive devices, all this other kind of stuff, paint thinners, all that kind of stuff. And so after the World Trade Center got hit, I had an FBI agent come in to me, and he's like, you can no longer, he said, because I did a lot of cargo shipping, and he said, you need to sign off on this stuff or you won't be able to ship. And I was like, I'm not signing anything, because to your point, if I signed on something that I didn't see, I didn't package myself, didn't load it myself, I'm surely not signing off on that and putting my John Hancock, because that's going to come back on me if something explodes. So, and he was like, you can't do that. I said, I surely can. Look at the size of this place. It's 1 million square feet. There's about 12 or 14 guys that are packing this stuff, that are putting in LD3 cargo containers that go underneath the planes, that are putting it on flatbeds. They're putting it on trucks and box trucks, everything like that. I says, a lot of these people lost families, because I was very close to New York City with that. And there was a few people that worked on the line that lost their family members there. And this is a very important step that cannot be missed.
You are absolutely right. And I've even seen where people use electronic signatures on those things. And it's some guy signing it who retired 3 years ago and they never updated the system. I mean, it can be pretty egregious. So yeah, you're absolutely right. This stuff is super important. And I mean, if you're gonna play in this sandbox, you got to know the rules.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask too, like, when I think about, I go to a lot of shippers. And you see the people that are working the docks, and I find, a lot of times they go through a lot of those people. So at some of these facilities that are shipping hazmat type materials, do you find that they are properly training all the people that are loading this type of freight, or what do you find?
I think it depends on the company. Some people take this stuff really seriously, and they spend a lot of money and time making sure their people know what they're doing. Some companies you walk into and man, they got it down. But I would say that if the management doesn't appreciate the danger and the nuances involved, the employees are never going to get it. It really does come from the top down in this sort of thing. If your managers don't appreciate how important that training is and they start thinking of it as a budget item, things are going to start going south. Training is just one of those things that you cannot skip on. And to that point, it's like people right now, everybody wants to do computer-based training because it's cheap, it's easy, it's flexible. But most of the computer-based training out there is boring and surface level at best, and pretty awful. My clients kept asking me for online training. I'm like, listen, I'm not doing it. I want to do in-person training so that I can make sure I can look at your people's faces and know that they understand what I'm saying, and relate to them directly. Well, they kept pushing for it. So I said, fine, if I'm going to have to do online training, if this is really what you guys want, then I'm going to do it my way. So no boring PowerPoint presentations. It's me on the screen teaching just the same way I do in person, with the same types of examples relevant to whatever class I'm teaching, using real life things, because this stuff is just too important. And if you insist on me doing this more, readily available generic class, then I've got to do it my way. And so that's actually what we've been working on for the past couple months. We have some ready and some are in progress now. And hopefully that can at least be a superior product to what else is out there, because this stuff is too important.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's scary at best. And one thing, even for Christy and I and anybody that's out there, broker or shipper, don't take a shipper's word of mouth saying that they're certified. See it. Ask for it. And when you're shipping that kind of stuff, because you're protecting yourself, because you may want to back away from that. So if the shipper says, oh, I'm shipping this type and not whatever, are your people certified? Who are they certified by? You can ask those questions. Can I have a copy of it? I'll show you mine if you show me yours, because no, but serious, it's so damn important, because, it's just like safety and pre-check inspections on the drivers that go in there and do road work, right? You do not want to kill a family. You do not want that on your on your shoulder. You want to protect at all costs your brand, your image, and your reputation as a service provider on all ends. And a lot of people out there, and I don't care if people scream at me, that means I got to get trained. So what? Go out there and get trained. It's ridiculous, because there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, that don't check this kind of stuff and just take it as a word of mouth. Do not do that with hazmat. Plain and simple.
I'm so glad you brought up the brokers, and you brought it up a minute ago, and I wanted to say something that I forgot about it, but brokers are such an important part of, because it seems like they're getting to be increasingly common, that more and more and more people go through brokers rather than going direct. And what happens is then you have the telephone game. Do you remember that when you were a kid, and this person would whisper something to you, and you had to whisper it down the line and down the line and down the line, and by the time it got to the last person, it was not even remotely related to what happened up here. And unfortunately, the same thing can happen in these broker relationships, especially when you start getting into the double brokering, which isn't even supposed to happen, but does. The shipper might tell the broker the right information, but the broker either doesn't understand or doesn't appreciate the importance of passing that on to the next guy. So when he gets the carrier, he's given the carrier the information. The carrier and the shipper never actually talk. They go through the broker, who doesn't know the questions to ask. Brokers, please get trained. Please get trained. Is it required for you to do so? No, but it's in your best interest, and it's in your customer's best interest, both the carriers and the shippers, and I can't stress that enough. One more thing you talked about I want to mention is you mentioned vetting your carriers. Man, I'll tell you, that is a step that is overlooked so much. I have this one client who has me vet some of their carriers every single year. They've got a list of them. I go through, and I'll do a couple this year, a couple next year, a couple this year, and then I'm back in the cycle again. And man, I can't stress to you how important that is. You're putting so much trust and faith in the people that you hand your products off to. Knowing that they are running a tight operation it's so important. But that East Palestine thing, the shipper had nothing to do with that accident, but they're going to pay for it too. And that's a rail thing, but the same thing can happen with a truck. You could do everything right, loading your tank truck or your cargo trailer, and then you pick some shoddy driver, and either your stuff goes missing entirely or it doesn't get there safely. And picking the people, know what you're looking for. First, make sure the drivers have a company ID, because right now there's so many incidents of drivers stealing trucks or just being a shady outfit and they steal the products. So making sure that they have a company ID, that they actually work for that company, they didn't just steal it that day. That you're actually expecting that carrier to show up. If you're expecting, Schneider, that it's Schneider truck that shows up, not JB Hunt or whatever. I'm just using generic names. And so make sure that you're expecting that carrier, and then also make sure that their endorsements are correct. When you look at that driver's license, if it has an H, they're rated for hazmat. If it has a T, they're rated for tankers. If it has an X, they're rated for both. So you have to make sure that you know what you're looking for.
And I feel like you should be going to Broker Carrier Summit to explain this to both sides.
I am going to Broker Carrier Summit, believe it or not.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to that.
Are you speaking though? Because I feel like you need to speak to everybody.
Definitely, all the way.
I just feel like this is something I've never really heard much at all my whole 28 years in my career. But I can tell you, when I first got into the business and we were shipping some intermodal hazmat, there was a certain way we had to even bill it, and I didn't bill it properly. I did something, missed something, right? And I know that the company we were an agent for at the time, Cornerstone, I know they got some kind of fine, right? I think they worked with the railroad on that or whatever. But again, like, I feel like it was like more of, okay, go through this training that was online to learn these certain things. And it wasn't like what it should have been. I mean, that was a long, long time ago. But again, I'm just saying, we do some here, not a whole lot of hazmat. We do a little bit. But yeah, I mean, again, just even to those details of working with a broker, right? And what that means. And I feel like this is something that's not really out in the industry.
I think a good hazmat training class.
That's one thing that you find.
What was that, Wendy?
Sorry, say that one more time.
I was going to say that a really good hazmat training course should be at least 3 to 4 days off site. I mean, not
necessarily. And here's why. Because when you go to a public workshop and you get that 4-day class, you're getting so much stuff that you're never going to use. You are getting, if all you do is 10 truckloads and you're getting all this stuff on limited quantities, it's all a waste of time. You can't sit there I used to teach the 4-day class for one of the training firms in the industry. And it's very generic. I mean, I would have people from, food companies in my shop with the same as oil producers. They don't need the same information. But if you customize the class, okay, I'm going to be teaching oil producers and I'm teaching loaders, this is what they need to learn. I can cut it down and focus on the things that are important to your company that they're going to see every day, and leave out all the stuff that you're never going to use, so that, one, I'm not overloading your brain, because I used to teach that class. I know this stuff inside and out, and my brain was melting after 4 days. So I can only imagine how my students felt. And I felt like I was torturing them. I'm like, guys, I feel like I have to tell you the same stuff that you're never going to use. Like, I know this is what you need, but this is what I have to teach you. But I don't do it that way. I do a 1 full day class because I'm focused on whatever it is my client is doing, the materials that they're using, the types of packaging that they're using, the types of tank trucks, tank cars, boxes, drums, whatever that my clients are working with, so that I can focus them on the things they need to know to keep themselves safe. They don't need to know everything in that book. They need to know what pertains to them and how to apply that in the real world.
I agree, because if you don't go over just that and you go over other stuff, then they're probably going to get confused. That's probably, honestly, I can't remember that long ago, but it was probably a lot of stuff like that in general. And again, I don't think there's ever been this whole thing about how important truly hazmat is. And it's, when that incident happens is when it's like, oh, why didn't we do this to protect ourselves?
It always takes a freaking catastrophic event to change somebody's mind. I say that a gazillion times. You need to correct the mindset. Think of today, of the possibilities that could happen tomorrow. Protect yourself. That's plain and simple. It's so easy. Really.
They say regulations are written in blood. And the reason they say that is because they're not written preemptively. They're written because something went wrong. Somebody was killed. There was significant property damage or something. And now they're writing rules to try to prevent it from happening again. But keep in mind, those rules are just the bare minimum. That's not where you want to live. You don't want to live on the edge of a cliff, right? You need some beach between you and the sea. Right. So, you need to have a buffer in there that, okay, we made this little mistake. We're still compliant, but we broke our own policy. So we need to fix this internally, but at least we're not putting our company at risk, some other one in the public at risk. There's some room in there. You can't operate on the wire all the time. You just can't. You're going to misstep.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think sometimes there's going to be stuff that happens that you really can't prevent, potentially. Again, I don't know all the details of the whole East Palestine situation, because there's just been so much around it. But just knowing the amount of money that they've had to pay out to residents, an X amount of miles from that location, or the health issues that it's causing this community, or that no one might buy a house there ever. People might not be able to sell their house. Like, these are all the things I hear from people. Actually, someone who lives like within 20 miles of that area. And again, like I know, like nobody wants this stuff to happen, but was that something that was preventable? That if someone did what they were supposed to do, this would never happen.
Yeah, and you know, an extreme example of that is the 3 Mile Island. You know,
Yeah.
the radioactive disaster. I mean, yeah, that's a really extreme example. But those guys were not well trained. The facility was not engineered properly. You know, they didn't recognize an emergency when it was happening, and they did the wrong thing. They cut off what they really needed to have more of, and caused a nuclear meltdown. And only just barely spared it from a full meltdown. And you know, they're able to function there again. But I mean, that's forever contaminated now with radioactive materials, forever. I mean, for nothing. If they had been better trained, if they had been engineered properly, if all of those things hadn't happened, none of that would have happened.
Because they wanted to save money.
Yeah. And my other question too would be like, so when an incident like that happens, how well are the professionals that are out there, like the firefighters, the response teams, like, are they everywhere? Like, can they be you know what I mean? I feel like that's got to be a very thinned out type of community or people with experience.
So having been a firefighter myself, I worked in 2 different jurisdictions. One was very rural. We didn't even have any hydrants in the whole county. We had to go to the next county and steal their water to fill our fire trucks. And then the other one was outside of a major city. So that had a much different funding scenario. The training that I got at the second one was far superior to what I got at the first one. And that's because they had the budget, they had the population to have the tax money to do the training and to have the right equipment. But the rural one didn't. I mean, it was fly by the seat of your pants. The guys in the firehouse are the ones that had to buy the equipment. And, you know, so if you, depending on where you go in the country, like the guys from New York City, they are trained. They know what they're doing. They have hazmat response teams. They deal with this stuff all the time. There is no one better. You know, some of the other big cities, I think LA has a pretty decent fire department. I don't know much about that one, but I used to live up in New York, so I know that one much better. But you go out into East Palestine, Ohio, or Farrington, Virginia, or I mean, you name it, and no, they're not getting the proper training. Most of these guys get a little bit of an introduction in a firefighter 101 class, and that's it. You know, some people do go on and take additional stuff, but even that, man, I'll tell you, there was so much that I thought I knew that I really didn't know when I was doing that stuff. It's just amazing.
Yeah, because I keep thinking, like, when that happens, right? Like, how do they get the right people that know what they're supposed to do in a situation like that? Obviously, know what chemical it was that even happened, and what are, you know, just all the different things you need to do. And I feel like that's got to delay the response of what they can even do to help.
Well, it's worse than delaying it. It actually can sometimes cause things to get worse. They make mistakes. Like, I'll never forget, I used to take my dog for training at this facility, and next door to it was a manufacturing plant that had anhydrous ammonia. Of course, I didn't know it had ammonia. I never really went in there, except for one day I showed up for training and I smelled it. And I knew exactly what that smell was, and I went looking for the source. Like, where is this coming from? Like, something is wrong. And come to find out, the ammonia tank was leaking. So I called the fire department, and when the guys showed up, I stopped them before they went in. I said, listen, there's an ammonia leak. You need to don your face masks and your breathing apparatus. Don't go in there without it. And these punky little kids who thought they knew everything walk in there with their bunker gear hanging off their pants, and no jacket, no hard hat, no face shield, no breathing. And I was just like, oh my God, I have to leave. I can't even watch this. It hurts. You know, they just don't understand the dangers of what they're working with. Now, there are some emergency response teams in this country that are phenomenal, and that's what they do. They specialize in hazmat response. Those guys know what they're doing. So the best thing that you can do if you're a rural fire department and you don't really have the training and the equipment is to call one of those guys. They are all over the country. Most of them have multiple locations so that they're located where they need to be, and they can get there in a relatively short period of time. It's not going to be minutes, but it'll be hours or a day or two. And sometimes those incidents, as you remember from East Palestine, go on for weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the hazmat crew that work around big oil tanks, refineries, you know, because anything could highly explosive, right? What's being burned or what's being kept, and God forbid if something happens, I mean, spills, whatever. I mean, it all depends on the position you're in and what kind of industry you're working in as well. You know, I guess the more complex, the higher the training compared to something like you're saying, rural versus city. It's the same thing. And I use this as a great example, right? EV cars, Teslas, batteries, lithium. I know I'm going to upset you, but I know I see this, and I have some common sense left after all these years. But when you see a Nevada highway being shut down because of the toxicity level for 48 to 72 hours, they build it, manufacture it to get it to market without the proper R&D on it as far as the toxicity of the lithium batteries. Now you take that same incident that was out in the desert, you put that in the middle of Manhattan, you're talking serious death. I mean, you're talking like a catastrophic event that's just totally unmeasurable. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's terrible.
Lithium battery cars keep me awake at night. I'm not even lying.
I'm trained in that, so that's why I mention it. So
everyone thinks, my carbon footprint, all of this stuff, great, but it's not true, because you still need the coal-powered power plant to charge the battery. So you're not even doing what you think you're doing. But there's so many problems with these. The one that scares me the most is, think about if now California has gone to all electric, right? They're going to have all electric by, 2030 or whatever it is.
It won't happen.
I don't think it can, but that's beside the point. The point is let's say you have a car accident that's a multi-car pileup, because those happen all over the country. You have 2 or 3 cars, 4 or 5 cars, all lithium batteries. Lithium batteries are incredibly, incredibly dangerous. People don't appreciate it because they carry them around in their pocket with their key fobs or their vapes or their cell phones or the laptop they have tucked in their backpack or whatever. These things are so incredibly dangerous. First of all, they burn really, really hot. They emit toxic gases. They keep reigniting. You can't put them out. You can't start them with oxygen. There's just so many problems with EV batteries. And the firefighters don't understand how to put this stuff out. They don't know how to fight these fires. They don't even have the equipment to fight these fires. Water is not going to do it. In fact, water could make it worse,
yes.
At least temporarily, until you flooded it so much that you're, but I'm telling you, like, the amount of water it takes to put out one of those fires is staggering. It's not
30,000 gallons, 30 to 35,000 gallons.
I don't even know the number, but it's a staggering amount. Water actually will react with the lithium. Lithium is hazardous, and it will react with water like sodium does. And once you do that, you can eventually overwhelm it, but it takes a long time. And these things will keep reigniting. You think the fire's out, you can get the people out. You have a car fire right now, and it's going to stay pretty much in the engine compartment. But you have a fire with a lithium battery. It's under the cab. It's under the cabin of the car. Like, it's under where the people are. So that engine fire is now in the cab instead of in the front of the car. There's just so many problems.
I would have never thought that with the electric cars and stuff, to be quite honest. Like, that sounds like an absolute nightmare. Like, it's
a nightmare, Christy. Like, you would not believe. And the biggest problem that I have, and that's why I'm totally against it, is the autonomous vehicles.
Yeah.
No way. Listen, I could go off just say 2 things. First of all, California can't even run their air conditioners on the infrastructure that they have. So 2035 isn't going to happen, number 1. Number 2, the hacking, the batteries in the autonomous EV vehicles, deadly. 80,000-pound missiles getting hacked or blowing up on a highly packed highway, the turnpike, whatever. It's so deadly. It's people are just numb to it because they just do not understand the complexity of it.
Because lithium batteries are so prolific, they think it's no big deal. Everything's a lithium battery now.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? Until something bad, like some serious situation happens.
It happens all the time, and they don't take it serious. I mean, that's just it. Let's keep on moving forward. No, let's stop. Let's redesign it to make it safe for the public. That's what they should be thinking about.
And and the reason I brought up the 2 or 3 car accident is because if one car breaches and this battery catches fire, the heat from that battery will cause the other ones to catch on fire also. So you're going to end up with 3, 4, 5, who knows how many cars are involved in this accident, all these lithium batteries going off. And again, that's not just a fire, it's emitting toxic gases. The gases can kill you too. They are superheated toxic gases. There's a nurse that I know who had a vape in her pocket with her car keys and burned the daylights out of her leg when the key short-circuited the vape battery. She had a spare battery, and she's never going to be the same on her thigh, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And that's just a little tiny vape battery. Can you imagine 2 or 3 electric vehicles? Oh God, I can't stand it. I really just.
I don't even want to think about it.
These be taken out in the street and beat with a wet noodle.
Well, again, I think more and more important why you need to get out there and continue to speak about this, because I think we all need to hear all this stuff that you're saying. And your passion just like comes through like so strongly. So like I'm curious, you know, like what is one project that you felt was like kind of like that you're particularly proud of?
Oh, geez, there's a few. I would say one that was really fun for me. It was a problem I found accidentally. I was doing an audit of a company right when I first started my company, actually, and discovered that they were shipping this product as a non-hazardous material, but it was very clearly corrosive. And I said, do you guys realize you're shipping a hazmat that you're regulating as non-hazardous? They're like, oh, yeah, we know. Like, wait, what do you mean you know? They said, oh, well, there's this exception in the regulations that says we don't have to ship this as hazmat. Let me see the exception. And I read it, and I could see why they said that, but they didn't read the whole thing. You got to remember that applicability section is really, really important. And this regulation was not applicable to them. And so they thought they were getting this relief. And in reality, they're shipping hundreds of undeclared hazardous materials, which is one of the biggest fines that you can get. And so they were shipping out truckloads and tank car loads of this stuff. And the carrier that they were using for the truck stuff wasn't even rated for hazardous materials. So he's carrying this corrosive material day after day after day in 10,000 gallon quantities and doesn't know it's hazardous. And so when I discovered this, they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Like our carrier, we got a contract, we got this, we got that. So they went into full panic mode. And so what we did was we went back and looked at exactly what they were doing with this product, how it was made. It was a byproduct of another process. So they were selling this byproduct so it didn't have to become hazardous waste. But then we needed to know how the people were using it on the other end. And essentially what we did was I helped them reformulate it so that it was below the threshold of a hazardous material. And it did not affect the end use for the customer on the other end. So it solved their entire problem. And that was such a unique solution and so much fun to actually put into practice and help them really out of a very difficult situation. That was really cool.
Yeah, because I was waiting for you to say, well, we had to put all this stuff in place and they had to completely change and get all this training. And I mean, where I'm sure there might be certain situations like that. But yeah, no, that's pretty cool when you're able to come in and take a look at that and figure that out for them.
Yeah, it was a much faster process in what you're talking about. And Christy, I'm going to be honest with you, when I first discovered what they were doing, that was what I thought, like, oh my God, we're going to have to start all over. Like they're going to have to break this contract, right? And then I got to thinking about like, no, there's an easier solution. This is so close to the edge of not being hazardous that if we make this one little change, we can get it below the threshold. And we sent it off for testing to make sure that I was right, to make sure that we did accomplish it. We sent it off to the customer to make sure they could still use it the same way. And all of that was good. And then they got to ship it legally this time as non-hazardous. So that was really rewarding.
Oh, yeah.
Saved them a fortune.
Yeah, I could imagine. They're probably like, you saved our life. How did they find you? Like just searching?
Yeah, so actually it was kind of a friend through a friend thing. It was actually my very first client that I had when I opened my doors. The guy that I had mentioned I was working with was friends with this other person, and that person's company needed help. So he called us, and actually to this day, I still work with that company. Wow. They are still my client.
They better still be your client after that.
Yeah, after that. Yeah, right?
Yeah, 13 years they've been with me. They are my oldest client.
No, that's great. So like when we might have covered this already, but when you're going and working with these companies, I would imagine the majority of the people you're working with are men. Or there's some, okay, and there's probably some women, but mostly men.
Yes.
And do you find that they like, I know you mentioned about the one company you work for, do you find that they respect you and what you bring to the table?
Depends on the company. I would say that sometimes they're skeptical. It's a little bit better now that I'm older. When I was younger and I looked really young for my age, it was a lot harder. But I can confidently say that by the time my engagement with them is over, they're convinced. They may think, what is this little girl coming in here going to teach me when I first walk in the door? But I don't let it bother me, and I do my job, and I'm really, really good at what I do, and I enjoy it immensely. So I have never yet failed to convince someone that I'm the right person for the job once they work with me.
That's awesome. We just need to get you out there more, right?
Yes, please. The more the better.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, like this was interesting to me because, again, we've always done a little bit, or you have that shipment that has like one jar of something on it that's hazmat and nothing else is. So you might not have to have a placard of some kind. But again, I can tell you it's going to make me look at what are we doing here and what are we shipping. and how much, just to truly know. Because I do agree with you. It is our responsibility
It is.
to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and if I can look over anything for you, I'm happy to do that. I can do it probably a lot faster than you can because I know what I'm looking for. So if I can be of assistance, just let me know. I take a lot of pride in doing this, and it's not altruistic. I am extremely passionate about this. I believe in what we're doing. I've seen too many people injured or killed, maimed, and I just can't live with myself if I don't do everything in my power to prevent those things from happening every single time. So I am passionate about it, and I want to help, and anything I can do to answer questions for anyone, please don't hesitate. I would so much rather you ask me and avoid losing a limb or a life than worry that you're going to bother me. Please ask.
I'll tell you what, I have all the respect in the world for you, because I've never ever heard somebody say, "I love hazmat." I mean, and being a woman, that's even more impressive, because I mean, do I like hazmat? Hell no, I don't like hazmat. Can I deal with it? Yeah, I can deal with it. Do I love it? Hell no, I don't love freaking hazmat. And like I said, I don't know anybody that ever said, "I love hazmat. I love what I do."
I really do. I do. This is amazing.
I feel it. I see it. I feel it. I understand it, and I'm thankful that the universe have people like you that actually love hazmat.
Yeah, because it's trying to prevent, and you're
pain in the ass. It really is. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, so with your passion, like, what is your vision for the future of hazmat and logistics? Yeah. Like, what would you say? What do you hope? Your work continues to influence the industry and people in it, because I feel like, again, you haven't been heard, in my opinion. You need to be out there and be heard a lot more than.
I concur.
Yeah, because I do think it's important, and you need to find some other women too that can follow in your footsteps.
I'm happy to help anyone that wants to get better at this. That's why I started becoming a professor. I ended up hating being a professor, but that's why I initially went down that road, is because I thought if I can help them at the early stages of their career and open their eyes to what's out there, then they'll know when to ask the question. That's the problem I find, is that people don't even know what they don't know. They don't know to ask the question. So if I can at least get that, if I can at least make you stop and think, is this something I need to know more about? Then I've done my job. As far as the vision goes, I mean, obviously, there's the altruistic, everyone's safe and no one ever gets hurt again, right? But that's pretty unrealistic. So I want to affect as many people as I can to be able to go home to their families at night in the same condition they went to work. I'm in the process of writing my second book. It's actually the second edition of my original book that you mentioned in the intro. And one of the things that I've added to this that I think is so valuable is a lot more practical tips, real world experiences. Here's what you're going to see in real life, right? Because anybody can say, here's what the rules say, but that's not helpful. What you want to know is what are you going to see when you're out there driving that truck, or when you're out there loading that rail car, or when you're loading those boxes in that container. What do I need to know? What do I need to experience? What do I need to say, stop, something doesn't look right? Empowering your people, empowering yourself to know when to ask the question is critically important. And so I'm really trying to accomplish that with this book. So if I can get this out there into people's hands and let them see what they don't know, that's really my mission.
Well, come to the next BCS where you actually speak on stage about this and have your book there. I'm trying to help you get this out, because I think that that's going to be a perfect place for you to continue to have a voice in this industry.
Absolutely.
With both sides, because both sides, the carrier and the broker, need to know. And then, of course, you have your shippers and whatnot out there too. But I just see that as a big stage for you to be on, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little bug and trade there. Maybe they'll have me do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and something. Yeah, I mean, you said something that I firmly believe in, that there's not enough practical experience like you have, that were in the trenches, that understand it. A lot of people work from the outside in, where there's other people that actually understand it, worked in those trenches from the inside out, that actually understands why it's as complex as it is. And some people make the uncomplicated very complicated, because they don't understand how everything mixes and mingles with each other, and why you do the things that you do. I mean, that's as simple as I can put it. So,
and unfortunately, it's even the training companies that everyone knows and are so popular. I worked for one of them, and all these instructors that they had, not one of them had any real life experience. One came from insurance, one came from teaching, one came from, so they knew how to teach, but they didn't have any experience with the stuff they were teaching about. So they didn't have any way to relate those real life things. And, I come from the exact opposite point of view. I'm not a natural teacher, but I enjoy explaining things to people in ways that they can understand because I know what it's really like. And I think that's one thing that sets my classes apart from other people is I just come from it from a totally different point of view.
Yeah, it's like kind of, I quit college and I started working for my dad and I learned how to do this, right? Just like you don't have to have that teaching behind you, so to speak. You have on-the-job experience that can show. And I think that's so much more important, to be quite honest, when you have that experience to teach others that experience. So now this has been great. Like I was sitting there thinking, how much are we going to be able to talk about all this during this hour? But no, you've shared a lot of great information. And as we're wrapping up the podcast, I always ask the guest if there's one piece of advice you'd like to share with the audience. Go ahead and spit it out there.
You cut out for a second. You always ask your guest if there's one piece of what now?
Oh, advice that you would like to share with the audience, to go ahead and share that with everyone.
Obviously I mentioned a few things, right? The training is certainly important, but it's not just the training, because that ends pretty much the classroom. And so if you don't know if your processes are right, or if you have any uncertainties, get someone in there who can help you from an operational standpoint. Training is super important, but it's not the only thing. Making sure that they have the equipment that they need, that they understand how what they do affects everything else after they touch it, right? That operational processes and procedures. Listen, there are some procedures I look at and they are 1 page, and that's not helpful. Or you look at another procedure and it's 54 pages. Who the hell is going to read that? You need to have something that is straightforward. You need to have something that is concise. Just building your whole process from the ground up, making sure they have the supplies that they need, making sure that everything is where it needs to be, and that when they send those stuff out, they have the same passion about making sure that stuff is safe, because they understand what happens if it's not. It goes way beyond the classroom.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We appreciate you sharing your time and your story and all the hazmat stuff with everybody, because again, it's extremely important, and I think a niche area that not many people think about, to be quite honest. So we really appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. And actually, Christy, if you don't mind, there is actually one more thing I really want to add, and this is mostly directed at drivers. Please wear your PPE, guys. Please. When you go to a customer's facility and you're going to be unloading molten sulfur, don't do it in sweatpants and New Balance tennis shoes, right? You need to have your PPE on. That stuff is there to protect you for a reason. If it's got holes in it, if it's cracked, if it's broken, if it's dirty, get it replaced. There's a guy I watched unloading a tank truck, leaning over high strength sulfuric acid, and he had the coat on, the chemical coat, but no pants. And he's like, "Oh, I'm covered to my knees." I said, "Yeah, but what happens when you bend over and now your coat separates and you're exposing your family jewels to this very severe acid? Like, you're not protecting yourself at all." And he never thought about him crouching down and working on this thing. He was walking around with a coat that went down to his knees. But everything that's super important below the waist, he's exposing to very, very dangerous stuff.
And here's the problem with that. Again, to your point, shippers need to be accurate in telling the broker, and the broker needs to relay that to the carrier so they know what they're dealing with. Because I'm not sure on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if they know what they're dealing with, they're going to have the proper attire to wear to load and unload that stuff. I don't think that they would have that in their truck unless they're pure hazmat, and that's part of their hazmat equipment that they always have on standby for anything that's out there. But it's highly critical. It's highly critical, to your point.
And not just having it in your truck, but wearing it. That guy with the molten sulfur, there's 2 or 3 signs in this loading area that say you must have a hydrogen sulfide monitor, because that's a toxic gas that'll kill you very fast. And when I was watching him do this, he's getting out and playing with his truck with no equipment on, no H2S monitor, no face shield, nothing. And this is a molten product, so it's very hot. And I said, where's your H2S monitor? Where's your PPE? I was on the truck. Well, how's that going to save your life? It's not on your body.
Right.
So yeah, please
Even
wear it.
even loading and
yes, the
unloading.
workers need to pass that information on.
Even loading and unloading, they should have, depending upon the material, eye wash stations that are right next to where they're loading this stuff. Highly critical as well to protect your site. So again, we could talk hours on this, and I appreciate you coming here because it's a topic I don't like discussing, but I do like to discuss it because it needs to be said and told.
And I'm like, more. We need more.
Well, then maybe you can find time to have me back on in the future, Christy. I would love to do that.
Yes, we absolutely will. I think there's some things, even just the education. I think there's some things that people just need to be educated on. And that's why I kind of said, hey, like going to some of these events, like grabbing a spot to speak on stage about it, because you'll have the whole audience there of shippers and brokers or carriers, maybe not all shippers, but some, just to talk about, because again, like in my world, there's not enough, I think, talk about it. And if you're just doing a little bit, I mean, I hate to say it, but people probably are not thinking like, hey, we have to make sure we're doing every single thing, dotting I's, T's, making sure, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not involved in our operations really, but I know that there's still some there. So I'm definitely going to look into it after this talk.
Or the more reasons to get involved, Christy.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the people that do it the least are the ones most vulnerable because they don't have the experience.
Right.
So, even if you say only do a little, well, that's still a lot of risk. And there's actually more risk the less experienced you are at it. So,
well, I'll make it a point to gather that information. We'll definitely be having another talk, but definitely want to have you back on the podcast to talk more, and we'll figure something out. So thank you.
It would be my pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. So folks out there, continue to watch and follow the Storytelling Chronicles, Empowering Women into Logistics. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another excellent guest. So for today, I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their week. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.